who knew we'd be here, eh, guys? This is quite a strange place for us all, I'm sure. So it's lovely to meet you, obviously. And it is, and there are people in here I don't know today, which is super exciting. And there are some people I do know very well, and thank you for your support. I hope you'll get a great value from this. So first of all, I'm going to open with a question. I want to know, how are you feeling about selling in a pandemic? It's an interesting one. How are you feeling? Put your answers in the chat, because it's a really great place for us to start. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to tell the people who don't know me a little bit more about me. This is the bit in the webinar where sometimes it goes on for about an hour, where the person talks about themselves. This should be 5 minutes, but I would like you to know why you should stay for the hour listening to me, okay? Because it's a little bit about my experience and what I've done in my career around sales. Next slide, John. Okay, so here's my sales road trip. Some of you have seen this, but what I thought I'd do today is just give you a taste of the different sectors I've been in, because actually this is quite interesting. I guess this has happened by accident, really. This isn't anything I planned to switch around lots of different sectors in my life and my career, but I'm fortunate that I did, because it means that I have been in banking, hospitality, digital marketing. I've sold SaaS products, sports hospitality, automotive. That was Recaro car seats for any petrol heads in the webinar today. The good old Yellow Pages, of course, which was amazing grounding for selling, and recruitment, manufacturing and exhibitions. Now, manufacturing, I sold stainless steel bar. So there's a really exciting product to sell. But I learned so much doing that. That was very much about technical selling. So I feel really lucky that I've had this amazing experience across all these sectors. And doing this subject about selling in a pandemic, it did come to me that I thought, what if I were in these sectors now? How would it be feeling? What would it be like? Because some sectors have clearly had issues more than others. And we'll talk about that as we go through the webinar. But then I also had a moment of madness in 2005 when my son Sam was born, where I set up my own business, which was then in retail. So another sector that I got wonderful experience of, and where my dad kind of was working when I was growing up. I have a love for retail, and I started my Truly Madly Baby business, which I took into Dragon's Den. And for those of you who don't know, you can catch up on this and all of the story in my TEDx talk, which I did in Brighton in 2018. And that talk was called There's No Such Word as Can't. So catch up on that, because that tells you the whole story, and it was quite a journey. Okay, so before we get started then, Sarah, what sort of answers came into the chat when we asked that question about how you're feeling selling in a pandemic?
Yes, probably as you'd expect, Jules, it's kind of quite a spectrum. So I guess at one end, we've got people who are feeling nervous and reluctant, feel that it's hard at the moment, and they're unsure how people are going to respond, and that selling actually is being diverted to other things like training. And then we've got some people sort of sitting in the middle of the mixed feelings, maybe a little bit cautious about it. But we've also got some really, really positive things, people feeling excited, that they see that this is an opportunity, that it's positive. Some things around the humanization of selling, that it's good,
Yes.
a lot of empathy. People are ready for the challenge, and I'm sure one you like, which is valuing customer conversations.
Oh, yes. Oh, we're going to talk about that today for sure. Thanks, Sarah. That's amazing feedback, isn't it? What a spectrum. And again, you're going to see in all of the content I've put together, you're going to keep seeing that varying spectrum of emotions and feelings from everybody. Because the one thing for sure is that none of us are feeling exactly the same about this. Which is probably one of the most interesting things, I think, right now. So let's talk about the presentation that I've put together. So next slide, John. Yeah. So what's happening in the global sales market? Now, some of you may be familiar with HubSpot, and I used to sell it, and also I use it still myself today. And it's just a global CRM system that a lot of people know about. But one of the things they also do is put out a huge amount of data, which is really interesting. Now, you can get data from lots of places at the moment about figures from the sales market in selling in a pandemic, but these guys had put out some figures which I found were really simple to see and really good way for us to start our conversation today. And they took the results from 70,000 global customers to make these charts, which we're now going to go through. And the reason I've done it this way is because some of us really do like to get into the data. I am a bit geeky when it comes to data, but it's also really good for us to see what is actually going on as a bird's eye view. So in HubSpot, if you're familiar with it, you can set up what they call deals. Basically, this is if you feel like a customer is going to buy from you, you can set it into the system, into your CRM system as a deal. So you'll put a value on it, you'll put a customer name, possibly a closing date. This is actually showing, as a bird's eye view, the total deals that have been created this year. So the chart runs from the beginning of this year in January. The line in the middle is the benchmark line, which is a pre-COVID benchmark line. So basically, you can start to see here what the pattern was before COVID-19 hit. So it's quite steady. There wasn't a massive lot of activity going down particularly, but what was happening was really very steady. As you can see, March hits. Around the middle of March, all of a sudden, less deals are getting created and even less deals are closing. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So that's the hit from when the virus started and what happened in sales. Now that data is also stripped into global data. So you can see on this chart the regions. So you've got things like your Asia, your Europe, Middle East, you've got your Latin American, your North American. Now, the reason I'm showing you these next three charts is so that you can start to see the patterns the same, no matter where you were in the globe. And then if you go to the next one, John, this one shows you industry, no matter what industry you were in. Yes, there's some variance, but look, that pattern's still the same. And then the last one is the size of company, which is also interesting because this goes right from 0 to 25. So that's the really small businesses to the bigger businesses over 201. Same pattern. We've all had this dip. It's all happened to exactly every one of us on a global basis. Nothing new there, nothing massive in terms of news. But look what happened to us in terms of what we did as a reaction. So this now is marketing emails. And HubSpot's CRM is incredibly connected to inbound marketing, and one of their email marketing suites is really good and helps you to just process all of your email marketing through HubSpot. So they've got a really good view of what happened when we all go to our strategies, and look what happened. We suddenly decided that we needed to bombard the market with emails. Okay, now also just check out the email open rate. Well, there were more emails, so obviously more people opened them, but look about in the middle of, towards the end of March, suddenly people stopped opening their emails, because here is where overwhelm starts to kick in. The good news is that towards the back of April, coming into May, we start to see they're still sending out the same amount of emails, but actually the open rate is starting to lift again. Now, I like to think that this might be because we've suddenly realised who we should be emailing and what the messages should be, and maybe we're even emailing more of our existing clients rather than new clients, because I want to talk about some of those things in this webinar. The next one then also looks at contact growth. So this is where we add new content into our CRM. And again, what an amazing picture. So you've got that steadiness beforehand, pre-COVID. That chart on the 16th of March goes massive. We have loaded as many new contacts as we can because we want to make sure that we reach as many people as we can. And of course, this is an overview and it's global and it's across 70,000 companies, but isn't that an interesting picture? And look what happens afterwards. Suddenly we stop adding contents. But the conversations that we're having, they start to build, and they build quite gradually on this chart, and they continue to build. So there's a really good news piece here. We are having more conversations. Hallelujah, because this is what I am all about, having human conversations. So those are just a few of the stats and figures from HubSpot. But listen, what has happened to us as humans? What did we do? And what did our salespeople do out there in this global market? We went through, you may have seen this, some of you, this is what we call the change curve. And it's based on the Kubler-Ross change curve, which was actually originally designed for when we as humans go through grief, which is actually really interesting. When you look, this chart almost mimics the charts that you've just seen previously about global business and how the sales figures and people were starting to connect in sales. So the beginning of, it's called the ending, but it's the ending of what was our norm. We were in shock. A lot of us were in shock. We were in denial. Our middle zone, which is called the neutral zone, that's when we start to get very frustrated. Potentially we might panic, we feel overwhelmed, and also can kick into depression. It's very human nature emotions. But coming out of the other side of it, which is in this chart called the beginning, which is actually quite nice because this is the beginning of a new norm for us, then we start to understand, we learn more, and then we have acceptance. And if we have acceptance, we are able to move on and actually flourish. And so this is a very interesting thing to look at in terms of our human emotions and then how we react when suddenly we're put into a situation of grief. And I truly believe that when the pandemic hit, from a business perspective, many of us went into quite a grief state. So this explains how we behaved and what happened. So next slide, what happened to us in sales? How did we initially react in sales? Hope you like the picture. Obviously that's the toilet roll aspect covered there. But what happened is we actually went into panic mode. And you can see that from those charts. You can see all those emails that went out, all those new contacts that we added. We absolutely panicked. Do you know, I even did a little bit myself because I went straight into making new content, making new courses ready to sell. And of course, that's just a human instinct. It's a survival instinct, really, when you think about it. So then the next slide, John. And the next thing that happened for people potentially in corporate teams, maybe even entrepreneurs who have got a really firm strategy in their business, they started the numbers game. And probably without getting their ducks in a row. But yeah, the numbers game absolutely kicked in big style. I don't know how many of you got a huge amount of connections on LinkedIn, and people selling to you straight away, emails selling to you. And do you know what? Even you may have done that yourself, and this is why you probably did it yourself. But the problem with that, as you'll see through the webinar, is that that's not always the best strategy that you can have. And ultimately, we attacked the market. You know, that was absolutely what I saw as a receiving potential customer and what I saw across sales corporations and businesses. This is back to that chart that shows you how we did all that and that rate of increase of emails and connections and contacts. That just confirms that's exactly what we did do on a global basis, which was really quite interesting. So the most important place to start, okay, and I guess anyone who knows me would know that I would have said this, is your customer, okay? This is critical. Actually, whether you're selling in any time, let alone a pandemic, sales should always start with your customer, but more now than ever. This is huge. Let's have a little look at our customer and the things that we should be thinking about. If you joined the webinar last week, you will have seen this statistic. It's a really good one for me to talk about. So the statistic is that 70% of buyers are fully defining their needs on their own before they engage with the salesperson, okay? And 44% being much more specific, okay? They've got Google, they can research, and you know, they can really crack on and find out what they believe they want before they even need to talk to us as salespeople. Very different to in my day when I first started to sell and there was just no internet and the salesperson was king. And the reason I bring this stat up is because this hasn't changed. If anything, this might be even more prevalent for you to understand. So you should be thinking about selling before you're selling, if that makes sense. You have to be in front of your customers before they're ready to buy, and doing lots of different things aside from selling, which we're going to talk about as we go along. But it is absolutely in line with my methodology, having sold for 32 years, in what I know to be true in terms of sales. So this statistic, hold it in your mind, it's really important. But the fact is, in a pandemic, and I alluded to this at the beginning, we may all be in this same storm together, but we are very much in different ships. We'll have different sorts of businesses, we'll be in different sizes of business, we'll be in different sectors. And if you don't do your homework about your customer before you start to sell to them right now, then you're going to lose all credibility. And you do not get a second bite of the cherry with this one. It's just a fact, more so than ever. So my methodology has always been, ever since I've started to sell, however I've been trained, to go out and connect, understand your customer, step into the customer's world, immerse yourself in what their world looks like, and create connection and relationships. And I'm delighted that now I'm hearing more and more businesses and sales leaders talking in this way, because this is the true way to sell as humans. That's what we like. That's how we like to connect. And so my methodology is really starting to come through and shine through during the pandemic, because it's really the things that you need to start thinking about in this situation. You should have always perhaps done it this way, but if you're going to change anything, think about doing selling in this way. And my acronym I talked about last week in the webinar, and you can catch this recording if you want to watch it back and you didn't join me. I went through all of the different words here in my acronym about loving your customer and not selling to your customer. And my goodness me, this absolutely applies more than ever now than it ever has before. So all of these things, love, opportunity, value, integrity, nurture and giving, all these human traits and elements are what you need to be using now whilst you're selling during this time that we are now in. And I am watching some of the comments, but I will definitely be looking at those afterwards. Thank you so much for contributing as we're going along. So what do we know? We know that emotion is one of the biggest things that drives buyer behavior massively. And you think about what we've just talked about in the change curve and how we're feeling emotionally. And so to sell and actually create wonderful sales relationships, we have to connect emotionally. And I've had people say to me before, yeah, but if I'm in a big company and I'm talking to a buyer, you know, they're really not emotional. Well, believe you me, they really are emotional because they're human. So anybody who is human has emotions attached to how they buy. And very much now, it's heightened even more so. We have to connect on that emotional level by understanding their real needs. not just the needs that we think they have. This is really, really important. So we have to know where your customer is right now. So even if you thought you knew where they were before, you had a great relationship with them, where they are right now will have changed. And you need to find that out, and you need to have conversations in order to really establish that. Nothing can be guessed at this point in time. Nothing can be assumed. So know where your customer is right now. And of course, the way to do that is to talk and have conversations. And luckily that graph we saw suggests that we are actually speaking more. How wonderful is that? But here's another thing that I think is massively important. Know who your customer's customer is. Because even if your customer is actually still quite buoyant, they're still working, they haven't gone into a massive down spiral, they may well have part of their market that they sell to that has. So we have to even go one further and go slightly deeper with our conversations with our customers. Not just how are you doing, but how is your customer, how's their market doing? That information is really important for you to be able to gauge how you then go forward and sell to that customer. This is all about building your knowledge. You have to be the expert that can help right now. This is just massive. And I always would say that anyway, that we have to show ourselves as the thought leader and the expert, because I believe that's how you build trust. But now more than ever, things like this, these webinars, I've been doing these, there's no charge to come to them. I'm absolutely thrilled you've given up your time. That's what you invest in coming to join me. But this is where you get to know me and my expertise and decide whether you like it and you trust it. So be the expert that can help, and think of how you can show up as that expert, but making sure you understand where you need to help. And that's those conversations. How are you? What's happening? Where do you need help right now? Right now is the phrase that is so important. And listen. You know, I know that this is almost one of those cracked records, isn't it? We've got to listen, we've got to listen. We've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. But listening is really, really a skill. And it's a hard skill to master. We can often hear things that we kind of think we've heard, but we have to listen to what the customer wants and not what we want to sell the customer. And that could mean adapting things. That could mean waiting, being more patient. There's lots of things and scenarios that can come from this. But if you don't do this bit, that really active listening, you will never know how to really serve your customer. And the people who are serving their customers in the best way right now will ride this storm and will come out the other side. So just a question for the chat, because I'm interested. We've got some audience today. I don't know all of you. I know some of you. Are you selling as a team or within a team, or are you selling solo? Pop your comments into the chat for me, because that's really useful then if I want to develop more webinars and more content for you, and equally for questions at the end. And if you're thinking of questions as we're going through, please put them in the chat, because lovely Sarah is looking after my chat for me, and we can pull them back out at the end and answer anything that you want to know if I haven't covered it. Strategy. We obviously have to think about what is our strategy in this pandemic. And, you know, there's a lot of webinars that I've watched myself. I'm trying to understand what big corporations are doing and thinking. I'm not surprised at all at what they're saying. And I'm delighted that the main thing they're talking about now is that we need to be more human when we sell. And this is just wonderful, really wonderful. And I'm quite emotional about this, because I have been preaching this way of selling for such a long, long time and actioning it as a salesperson in my career. So I know it works. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't chase the figures and the targets and the revenue. And of course, that now is changing. So let's have a look at a little bit more about what you can think about when you're looking at your strategy. One of the big things that lots of businesses have been doing is they've been starting with their existing customers. It's really hard to get new business compared to actually evolving and looking after your existing clients. So the smart businesses at the moment are actually putting a lot of their focus and their strategy into existing clients. So actually, how are they? What's happening with them? All the things I've just mentioned, what's happening with their customers? What do they need from us right now? How can we provide the service we provide in a different way? So lots of things around existing customers. Start thinking about who do you already work with? What do they need from you? All right, because just going all out for new clients is a really tough road. It's always tough, but right now it's even tougher. And talk. And we've talked about this a few times. You'll hear me say talk several times in this, but this is just a massive message to keep hammering home. No assumptions. Talk. Take the time to talk. I have something that I call a virtual cuppa, and you'll get to know that about me if you don't know me already. And these are my slots and my times in my diary where I get to chat either to new people or to existing clients. This is where you learn the most about anything in the world, is when you talk. So I encourage everybody to start thinking about having talk meetings where they're literally just having a conversation and catching up. And you'll find out so much more than making it a structured, interviewed, process-driven meeting. Let's talk. And if you are going to do outreach, because there's also an element where you can still try and get new clients, just understand the balance of that and what that should look like. Your outreach has to be quality. You have to think about phoning 10 people in a day rather than 100 people. Maybe those figures are kind of exaggerated, but I want to make the point here that the quality of your outreach is so much more important than anything else you'll do. And it might be that you don't call them. It might be you use other methods. And again, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But the quality of what you're doing and saying when you actually reach out to new people is massive. I have had so many people try and sell to me and they have no idea who I am. They know nothing about me. And I have to say 99% of them were trying to sell me something that I would never have bought. And I find that a shame. I don't get angry by it because I'm a sales coach. And I know that actually I could work with them and help them hugely in how they could reposition their outreach to make it much more quality. But make it quality. And look, isn't this just the best thing ever? You know, I'm often fighting with people around the numbers game in sales. You know, when people say to me, yeah, but you've got to have these targets of so many calls a day and so many emails a day. But look what Albert Einstein said, and we all know who he was. Everything that can be counted does not necessarily count. And everything that counts cannot necessarily be counted. What a best time for this. Remember this one. It's far better for us to not be counting how many, but thinking how well it was, how well it went, and actually the whys. Why are we actually doing it? What's the purpose? And what's the outcome? Massively exciting. Some of you will have seen the value ladder. You'll interpret it maybe in different ways in your business. If you haven't seen it, this is fabulous. And I do a huge amount of work on value when I'm coaching one-to-one, in my group sessions, and in the work that I do with clients. The value ladder allows you and a new customer to be able to connect on a level where you can build trust. That's ultimately what I believe we can use the value ladder for most. So you may start with something that's free, this webinar, for example, and then people can then go on and follow you further and want a little bit more from you. I have a book that would go on the next step of my value ladder. I have sessions that are group online. I have one-to-one coaching sessions. So it's about taking the value up a level every time. And of course, the price will increase for that because you pay for great value. But the point about the value ladder is you may have already done this work, but right now you might want to revisit your value ladder. If you look at the next slide, John, and create a new value ladder. And how can you add extra value without jeopardizing cost? So this is all about the conversations that hopefully you've now had with your clients and your customers because of what we've already said in this webinar, finding out where they're at and what they truly need. And your value ladder can then change and be adapted. So always have this in place, but think about what needs to change on it for me to serve my customers where they are now. And how can you add extra value? So what can you do? Could you, for instance, add in something that isn't a massive cost to you, but just gives them far more value? Could you think of a product that actually you could really quickly design that then complements what you already do? Could you think about how they pay you and then structure how they pay in a different way? That's giving them value. And I could make loads of suggestions for you, but the people you need to ask about this are your customers, because you need to find out what would be valuable for them today and then create these new options for them. Options are huge when it comes to selling just on an ordinary day. But in the pandemic, we need to think about giving even more options, but the right options, because we understand our customer. We've had those conversations. We need to make it easy for our customers to buy from us and then nurture that buying journey. So there's no rushing here. There's no forcing people to close those deals and buy now. That is not going to work now. You need to start creating their expertise, being the thought leader and holding their hand through this journey. It could be just as hard for them as it might be for you. But there will be no mileage in forcing and pushing right now. That's just not the tactics that are going to work, which is kind of obvious, but let's think about how we can formulate this strategy so that it builds the trust for longevity in your business, because it's their choice at the end of the day whether they're going to buy from you. It's not yours. And that's really important for us to know. If you're in a business where currently there is no demand, here's a few things to think about when you're looking at your strategy. Adapt. So again, this is obvious, but you've really got to start thinking about, if there's no demand for what I was previously selling the way I was selling it, how can I adapt that to either be a slightly different product or even delivered in a different way? Look at how many people have actually pushed things online who probably never even thought they could. We're going to look at some examples of that in a little while. Next, you need to innovate. I think most of us, if we're running our own businesses, are entrepreneurial, and innovation would be something that probably comes quite naturally to us. But the best way to innovate is to understand what your customer needs, because then you can do it in the best way ever. Otherwise, you might be just innovating for the sake of it, and it's then creating something that your customer is just not in the market to buy at the moment. So there's a collaboration involved in innovation. Try saying those two words together. But you have to meet your customer where they are today. And so they are the driver in all of this. It's no longer about sales, driving and being in charge. I don't think it was for a long time myself. But if you felt that was the way that you were running your businesses, running your teams, then it is now about the buyer, and you can definitely join with them and collaborate. And then what do they need right now? So again, looking at what is it, the help that they need right now. Do they need better payment terms? Do they need a slightly different product? Do they need it delivered in a different way? Do you need to tweak it, make it feel different to how it was before, but still within your skill set? Don't try and pivot which is the favorite words that we've heard lately out there. Don't try and pivot and do something that actually you can't do or you have no experience in. That's not what this is about. This is about being clever and switching to things that you can do. You'd be amazed at the things you can actually achieve and the skills you have when you have to put them into practice. And then finally, how can you help them? So in other words, what can you do to help that isn't even about selling? Because this is where the human element comes in. And we have seen a huge amount of that out there at the moment. Could you give webinars like this where you offer your knowledge? Could you go onto podcasts where you're interviewed and you offer your knowledge? It's about being visible as a person who is helping and offering advice. That's what you still have, even if maybe your sales aren't hitting where they need to be right now. But if you're a company who is experiencing extra demand, because that's also happening in the market, you've only got to look at Zoom and what's happened for them. My goodness me, I bet they didn't expect this. You've got to think about other things as well if you have got extra demand. So the first thing I would say is understand the value that you give in the long term as well as now. So for instance, if Zoom are getting a load of people signing up for their free product, they are now a captured audience for them to think about how they can make those long-term customers. And you may have customers who have come to you that you didn't expect to come to you. They do need your services. It's about making sure you can keep them and carry on the journey with them. Then that's really clever, but just be mindful of it. Also manage the customers so that they do become your long-term customers. So existing customers, make sure you don't ignore them and continue to work for them and look after and support them. That's really important. And then finally, manage the expectations if urgency is required. If you can't deliver at quite the pace that you could before, be transparent about it and be honest, because that will really keep your customers happy. I buy special dog food for my dogs because I've got a little dog and she's got a problem. She had stones and I couldn't get this food from my supplier at all except for a 12-day delivery. And I waited. I had enough food and I waited because they've been so good in the past and they were being very clear that when I would get it, and I got it within 10 days. So they even exceeded my expectations. But this is the stuff that makes you able to connect and keep your customers in the long term. Sales isn't just about selling to new customers, it's about nurturing and keeping and building the trust with your existing customers during these times. I think lots of people have seen different responses from some businesses, which has been very interesting. That's that curve again at the beginning that we talked about, the grief curve. So innovation, isn't it a magic word? It's wonderful. It's an inspiring word. Some of you said in the comments that selling in a pandemic for you felt exciting. And I'm guessing you could well be my innovators in the audience. But innovation is massive. Haven't we seen so much of it around us? And just before I talk about some examples of that, I want you to think about what are the changes that your business has made in the last 8 weeks. And I would love to know in the chat if you've actually made real pivots, if you've created new products, or if you've delivered them in different ways. What have you already done in an innovative way in your business? It would be really interesting to get that feedback. And while you're typing, I'm also going to just show you some of the examples of businesses that have made changes. And these have been within 8 weeks, inside 8 weeks. I mean, how incredible is that? Look how quickly we can change when we need to. We've had hotels. I was in the hotel sector. That was one of the sectors I worked in. They've become medical centres. They've become centres for homeless. They've actually also had storage facilities available because they have space. You know, we had conference rooms that took 300 people where I worked. And those have turned in some instances, to storage space for some people. Also things like hiring rooms for working space, because if you don't really want to be stuck at home, but you also can't go into the office environment, some of the hotels have opened up their bedrooms as workspaces. It's innovative and it's clever, and it means they've got some revenue coming through rather than others. Manufacturers, we've seen a lot of this on the news. They're making PPE equipment, ventilators, some of the real big names like Dyson, I think Rolls-Royce were involved in making ventilators, sinks for healthcare facilities. So there was a company that made stainless steel products, and they switched to actually make sinks instead, which went into care homes and into the NHS. Completely switched overnight, started to create and manufacture something different. Logistics have been delivering different cargoes. Kind of makes sense, but there's real complications with that. But we've managed in terms of load, in terms of tachos, drivers, how long drivers can drive, but they've managed it. But I lost £25,000 overnight in my business from cancelled speaking events and from cancelled workshops. So it was really tough and it was hard. However, I straight away created new online products in order to deliver things online, instead of actually worrying that I just couldn't do my job anymore. And then schools, they've gone online. Anyone with children and schooling that's going on, it's incredible what they've done and achieved just online. My son's got emails and Google places he goes to. It's really wonderful to see. Chemical manufacturers and distilleries are now making hand sanitizer gels. It's wonderful. Just hope that some of the guys who like their gin don't end up drinking some of this sanitizer stuff. That probably won't taste quite so good. But how amazing that they have managed to do that. So, Sarah, is there anything in the chat that's really innovative that we can shout out in the webinar?
Yeah, I think there's lots of stuff. So some of it a little bit similar. So people transitioning workshops online, training online. And somebody said they've totally reinvented themselves and moving their products online, which is really exciting. There's I like I think it was Connor who works in branding, that they started branding hand sanitizer, which obviously is very, very popular with people.
Love that.
People are refreshing their websites, starting to put together new images. There was a VR, I think that's virtual reality version of an education village. And someone has set up an entirely new business, having lost their job as a virtual assistant. So lots of really, really good stuff.
What an awesome audience we've got today. Isn't it amazing? I mean, I still stop for a minute and I think, look how great we are. Look how we can adapt and how we can flex, and the amazing skills we've got. You know, it's quite easy to say, I can't do this. And of course, you know, my dad said right from when I was a little girl, there's no such word as can't. And that's my TEDx as well. But it's true. There's always a way to do something different. And I think it's just about how rewarding that really is when you achieve it. So well done to everybody who has actually flexed and pivoted and innovated. Well done, you're amazing. And we can get through this. On things like this, I think you get to also bond a little bit as well and appreciate that we are all in a certain place together, even if we might be in slightly different ships, you know. So look, communication, this is a really big one, and we need to just cover this because it's massive. When you think about communicating in this pandemic that we're in, we have to think really carefully about how we do this. It has to be in a more sensitive way. It has to be in this empathetic and understanding way. George Bernard Shaw, I think we all recognise and know George Bernard Shaw. He said the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. I can't really say this without smiling, because isn't it an amazing quote and so true? How many people think that they communicated really well, but actually, yeah, they didn't. and people didn't really understand what they were trying to say. And I'm not going to go and quote any recent events on that one, but in business it is massive. We communicate and we think that we are telling the customer everything they need to know. We've made huge assumptions, just as I mentioned with the people who've been trying to sell to me over the last few weeks. And actually, it's just been done wrong. And there's not a second chance. It's really hard. Some people are very lovely and they do give people lots and lots of chances. But let's face it, in business, we're in a very big place and it's very saturated. So you've got to get smart with your communication. Get your message right. And that is only done by understanding what your customer needs. All right. So your message isn't right because you think it's right. Your message is right because you are addressing what you know your customers' problems and challenges are today. And that's going back to all the things I've said about having these conversations and understanding your customer. And when you do get your message right and you apply empathy and understanding, it really does go miles and miles, because we buy emotionally. Remember, right at the beginning, we talked about emotion. We just want to feel like somebody cares about us right now. You know, it's tough. We're all in different scenarios, but most of us, even if we're in more fortunate scenarios, I am a hugger and I don't mind admitting it. I'm missing having a hug. And just things like that, you can give communication hugs to your customers in a really beautiful way, just with words. I know we've got a couple of copywriters in my network, and I think they're here today as well. You guys know how to use words in order to create wonderful emotions. So if you're struggling with copy, then absolutely talk to the amazing copywriters out there, because these guys know how to create empathy and understanding. We can't all be good at everything, but it's important that you get this right, because this is your business. So empathy and understanding. And look, we knew today we would talk about video. That's just what we're doing right now together. We're all on a webinar together. How bizarre is that? But the fact is, video is absolutely king right now. It's been king for some time in marketing. Lots of people have been banging on about it, saying it's so important. We need to use video. Most people can't bear the thought of going on video. It's a very scary place. And we're all different. And that's why we've all got UHP, as I call it, a unique human proposition. You'll hear me talk about that a lot. I run a whole program for corporates all about your unique human proposition. The biggest asset you have as people is you. So video is important. Here's some of the stats. These are pre-COVID stats. So imagine how these could have blown up. I mean, I don't know what they are today, but they must be triple, maybe even more than they are now. But these are the hours spent per week watching videos online in 2019, only last year. Feels like a long time ago. And this is what video marketers get in terms of more qualified leads because of using video. 66% more qualified leads. That's phenomenal. And 54% of consumers actually want to see more video content, and they want it from brand and businesses that they support, because it's real, because it's how we connect. So there's three things to think about when we're looking at communications. Obviously, there's probably loads more, but just today I wanted to just touch on the marketing side. Now look, remember that stat at the very beginning that I talked about, that's 70%. So these buyers are 70% down this journey before they've even started to want to talk to us as salespeople. Well, this is the piece beforehand where we start to get smart and using marketing and these tools. So look, there's YouTube. We all know YouTube. It's not everybody's cup of tea to join a YouTube, to start a YouTube channel, but to be honest with you, if you've got video and you're making them, make a YouTube channel and put those videos on there so that there's this reference point to send people so they can see you in real life. There's also WhatsApp. WhatsApp has become a really big tool lately now in marketing, along with text, which I'm going to mention in a minute. Now, the thing about these are, people believe that it's more instant to get in touch with a prospective buyer, because we're not always reading our emails, especially at the moment, but we are definitely reading things like WhatsApp and our text messaging. So there's a big piece now where these tools are becoming even more prominent with marketing. On a personal level, I'm not sure I want marketing coming to my text and WhatsApps. That's probably a personal choice. But if you do this right and you get consent and it's actually a wanted approach, then these are really instant ways of us connecting during something like our pandemic. TikTok. I don't know, if you've got children, you'll definitely know about TikTok. I have a TikTok channel. It's hilarious. I have no idea what I'm doing with it, and I'm way over 50 to be using TikTok. However, here's the thing. More and more businesses now are jumping on to TikTok, and they are creating their own channels and growing their audience rapidly. I have a friend called Ali Mirza. He's based over in Texas in the USA. He started TikTok really not that long ago. I think he's over 20,000-30,000 plus, probably more now, followers. Really rapid growth, because every day he's coming in giving fabulous, really short 30-second video content. This is the way to build your audience when you're thinking about your selling. SMS I've mentioned, that's very along the lines of WhatsApp, but these are now the two places to watch. This is where the marketeers are now starting to drop their content. And then the middle one here, this is actually podcasting. And of course, I have a podcast called The Human Conversation. So it's Live It, Love It, Sell It. The Human Conversation. And the thing about podcast is it's another way of you showing your profile, being the expert. So you can either run your own, but if you don't fancy that, and it's really not that complicated, so you should try it. But if you don't want to run your own, be a guest. Go out and be guests on podcasts, because it's about raising your profile as much as direct selling right now. So you've got to start mixing this all up and get visible. That's part of the Live It, Love It, Sell It process and methodology. And of course, LinkedIn. LinkedIn's huge now. I'm a massive fan. Most of the people I'm now meeting and connecting with, wonderful people, have been on LinkedIn. It's a wonderful connecting tool. But I'm talking about marketing here. So this is about showing yourself as a thought leader, offering the expert help, showing your personal brand. Don't get confused with selling when I'm talking about marketing, because this is the beginning of selling, where you're showing up so people can choose you in that pre-70% bit, yeah? Outreach, we talked about outreach, that's important. We need to have an element of outreach in our strategy, so we are being proactive. But this is really special at the moment. You've got to do it in the right way. You've got to get that message right, and you've got to be empathetic, as I mentioned. And the great way to do outreach, I think, and I've got WhatsApp and I've got SMS here, same principles as we just talked about before, because they're becoming really popular channels. Personally, Vidyard, this is something I think you should look up. And it's a little app, and it's a platform where you can make really short videos, which you can then send via a WhatsApp, a text, an email. But the point is, you're not sending a written message, you're sending a video of you, a real video. How amazing is that? I have had these, very few and far between, I might add, so there's massive scope to do this. But when I get a Vidyard video, which is literally a link in my email, I press on it and I see a real person saying, "Hi Jules, I really want to connect with you. I want to find out more about you. How about we have a virtual cuppa, or we connect and have a Zoom call?" All right. Now, that's not the script necessarily, and I don't even want you to script. But the point is, we will connect with video far better now, because we see a real person who is empathetic and somebody that we want to connect with. So I would really recommend you look at putting some sort of video in your outreach content, because that's really important at the moment. And of course, SMS is another way. And then connecting. So this is the magic. This is connecting and having conversations. And this is where you really do connect and sell. All right. And I know that the word sell always feels a bit yucky and horrible, but this is about human connection and human selling, as I talk about it, the live it, love it, sell it stuff. And here are your channels where you can start to really connect and have conversations. You can build your profile and your personal brand online. That's lovely and that's important. But at some point you need to take it offline. And of course we can't meet anymore. We can't shake hands anymore. So we go offline via things like Zoom, my virtual cuppers. You can also do things like FaceTime. That's really popular. People enjoy that. Also with SMS, and because you're now actually having a conversation, that's a very personal, agreed conversation. If you're with your children, you're not going to be checking your emails, but you might well be able to pick up a text really quickly. So it's, again, this really preferred new way of people wanting to connect. And of course, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is about having conversations and taking them offline. The other day, last week, I had, Jeff's online with us today, I had a fabulous conversation with Gillian, who was in Israel, Jeff, who was in the USA, and I was in the UK, and we had a virtual cuppa together. It was absolutely fantastic. And so these massive opportunities that we have now to connect, how amazing is that? There are other tools, by the way. Yes, just seen somebody put Google Hangout. There's lots of other tools, by the way, that do this stuff, but these are the ones that I use and that work really well for me. So remote selling, once you get onto these calls, there's a huge array of things that I could do, probably a whole webinar on remote selling, about maybe your background, thinking about all lots of other bits and bobs to consider when you are remote selling, because let's face it, this is probably the main way we're going to be selling for some time yet. But a couple of things I want to just help you with in terms of little takeaways for you. If you haven't heard of them before, then just be aware of Zoom fatigue. And this is a thing. This is actually a thing that happens in our brains. And it is a mixture of us having to actually work much harder over video to decipher body language, listen more intently, and actually interpret messages across video is hugely more difficult to us than it is when we're face to face, and that causes fatigue. So if you didn't know, it's a real thing. It's actually a physical thing. So be aware of it, so that when you're actually doing a meeting, that you make it a good short time as opposed to a massive long thing where everybody gets tired and you don't really achieve anything. You don't want to go into overwhelm, and you certainly don't want to get people switching off. Plan and focus the meetings. Well, I kind of think that's a thing for meeting face to face, but even more so on your Zoom meetings or your, whichever platform you use, your video meetings, because you should be looking at less time, which means more focus, which means maybe a great agenda, and thinking about the outcomes that you truly want from those calls. That's what these are all about. So actually you're taking them through a process, but in a really human conversation way. But what advantages we have now? We have this massive global reach that maybe some of us hadn't thought that we had got before, and we really do. And I think that I would never be able to say I was an international sales coach if it wasn't for something like Zoom. I did travel into Boston last year to do some coaching, so that was great, and I got to see them face to face. But I coach all over the world, right from this little spot here that you see me in, and that's really something for me. That's amazing. And you all have that now. You have this global reach. Your markets have potentially opened up to huge markets beyond anything we could have imagined. And that's come about from this pandemic when you think about it. And let's talk. And I said I'd mention talk several times, but Zoom allows us to talk, FaceTime allows us to talk. I don't mean writing emails and I don't mean texting. I just mean this. This is the biggest way we connect. I can be seen. I am 3D. You can see my expressions. You can hear the tone of my voice. You can see my face, my eyes. This is massive in human connection. So if you're not really aiming to have every sales conversation in this way, somehow on whatever platform you choose, then you're going to be missing out. You focus in sales, here's some of the things that we are seeing. Relationships with customers. This is fabulous. We are focusing more on our relationships than we have ever done before. Isn't that marvelous? What's happening now in the bigger companies, we're now looking at weekly trends because things are changing so rapidly. We're having to be really aware on a much shorter time scale. That this is going to be the magic of you being successful in sales, is focusing differently on how you target and looking at relationships and actually patience and longevity. And your strategy, how you communicate, how you're going to make your message the right message for your customers. How can you understand your customers better? And how do you have the right mindset to get through this? Because remember, the curve, potentially going through that curve. Is there any reason why we suddenly hit more challenges, which we may well do, but being aware of how we keep in sales without the pushy, yucky panic that we do not need to have? And I know that we need to make revenue, and I understand we're running businesses. And at the beginning of this pandemic, to lose the money I lost out of my business was a massive hit. But I kept the faith and I kept visible. I kept going out and showing people who I was and talking about my message consistently and my personal brand, my passion about sales. And I have had new clients one after the other. And it has been amazing. I didn't know that would happen, but I do know the methodology works around live it, love it, sell it. How we communicate, which we've talked about today, but understanding and moving with your market. This is another big one. It's understanding what's going on in your market, how the pandemic is affecting your market and your customers' market. Remember that one, because that will really hold you in good stead so that you can understand exactly what you need to do for your strategy. So final thoughts. Namaste. Apparently that's how you say it. I just have to ask my son. But the fact is, you know, we probably won't be shaking hands for a very, very long time. It makes me feel quite emotional because the whole essence of doing business and meeting on a business level was we shook hands with each other. Sometimes we hugged if you were a hugger. But the fact is we can't do that anymore. So, you know, maybe this is how we will greet each other going forward for a little while yet. But the final thoughts from me are these, because I think selling in a pandemic might feel very different, but it really goes with everything I talk about in Live It, Love It, Sell It, about everything we do on a human level and connection. And I think there's a huge amount of hope involved in this. And people might sort of disagree with me, but I won't change my mind on that one because I see so many people innovating and so many things and great things happening in business. Look at how companies have already adapted and innovated. And those examples are great examples for us all. Look at how you have all innovated and pivoted and changed direction where you needed to. This is amazing what we've already done. There are now 13 vaccines ready for clinical trials. Vaccines can take 10 to 15 years, from what I've read, to come to market. And this has already happened. I mean, isn't it amazing what we can do collaborating in ways like we never expected? And the reason why this one's smart is because we're all different. So even if you and I did exactly the same things, we have our UHP, we would do it different. So why can't we collaborate and help each other and work together? Isn't that amazing? And we're all growing and we're learning more than we have ever learned before, just within a short 8 weeks where we have been facing this pandemic together. So review what you're doing, refine it, review it again, refine it, review, refine. This is the pattern that we need to get used to. Always watching, always listening, always finding out what our customers need, watching what competitors are doing, but in a good way, listening to the data from the market. This is how we sell now going forward. All of that knowledge, and then putting in our human, our big dose of human, because that's why people will buy, because they know, like, and trust you, and they will connect emotionally. That's what we have to do selling in a pandemic. Nothing stays the same. And we know this one, but right now this is absolutely correct. 100%, nothing stays the same.
So what would you do differently after this webinar? Please let me know, because I would be so interested to see whether there was something in here that really resonated with you that you can start doing almost straight away to help you get through this pandemic.
Very quickly, I've got a book. Please read it. It's fabulous. Lots of people have read it and think it's lovely. Live it, love it, sell it. This tells you all about my methodology. And then I've also got other things that I'm doing, just flicking through quickly on these slides. Next slide, John. I've got my podcast. I talked about podcasts. If you don't want to make your own podcast, be a guest on a podcast. If you think you could be an amazing guest on my podcast, then tell me, connect with me, and let's have a human conversation. It's Mental Health Awareness Week this week, and my fabulous podcast with Loz Jones that you can see there, the carrot-shaped stick, that is a really great podcast to have a listen to. My UHP experience, we've talked about this. This was a pivot for me. This is a program where I go into a business and I'm in with them, and I go face to face with them and I work with them. I can't do that now, for now. So I now have it online as the UHP experience. So it's modules and it's sessions that I can then run through with corporate teams. Exciting. And I've been doing quite a bit of that, which has been brilliant. And then there's also the Legends Only experience, which is very much the solopreneur program, which is an online group program called the Pick and Mix program. That's really fun, 6 separate modules, but you pick 3 or more. And then you come and learn just a bit more about selling, and of course one-to-one coaching. If you think there's a way I can help you, let's have a virtual cuppa by Zoom, and let's practice everything we've preached, obviously, in this webinar. And then my next webinar is on the 1st of June, and that is about why stories sell. So I'm going to be digging deep into storytelling, because it is another fantastic way to connect with humans when you are actually selling and building your customers. So just the very last thing to talk about. These are some of the things that you mentioned during your sign-ups. There's a little section where you could tell me what you wanted to know, what you needed help with. And these were the array of things that people mentioned about coming back after furlough, opportunities in network marketing. You know, is there an opportunity? Absolutely, yes, there is. Of course, there is. Because in network marketing, it's a business opportunity. So people will still be starting businesses and wanting to start new businesses. That's an absolute fact. A channel manager from Canada. Do you know, it's been lovely. There are global people signed up to join me today. So I'm hoping that they have managed to tap in and join. Buyer's behavior. Well, we've kind of touched on that, really. The buyer's behavior is very much like the curve you saw, but also let's talk to our customers and find out what is their behavior, how are they feeling, appropriate messaging, how to sell without being insensitive. We can all do that. That's just about connection and understanding and empathy. Prospecting when people are not willing to meet new people. Well, we have a huge array of tools at our disposal, have how we can actually meet with people without meeting face to face, which is amazing. But make sure they have a need is kind of the big message in all of this. How to sell on the phone. There's a webinar about that one, which I'd be really happy to put together. That's a big subject all on its own. And how to approach and sell to corporates. And I'm just starting a business and I want to learn about selling. All of these things, I'm hoping I have given some of you something to take away from this. Are there any more questions, Sarah, in here that I need to know about? Any questions that I could answer?
I think the only one that kind of came up a little bit earlier was from Connor, so I'm not sure if it's been answered, but he was talking about what's the right way to pivot an offering. For example, if you moved to offering, I guess, quite a different product, how do you go about that?
It's all about what your customer needs, because it has to start with them. So if you're going to change a product that you sell, you have to still know that there's a need for the product you're going to potentially change it to. So I think it would be about really digging deep into, right, okay, what industry sector are you in, Connor? Why do your customers currently buy from you? Where are they at the moment? Meet them where they are now. What do they need from you? And can you actually create a product with your skill set that actually fulfills that need? So you can't do this for the sake of it necessarily, because otherwise you'll possibly not have the quality that you want. But I think it's about trying to make sure that you understand what your customer needs, and then whether you have the skills to switch your product and flex your product to something different. Hope that helps. I hope you've enjoyed this. There will be a recording of this so you can watch it back. I hope you've taken something away at least to be able to carry on and stay positive, because you can still sell, most definitely, and people are still buying. You just need to make sure you make that connection. Thanks again, guys, and I hope to see you on the 1st of June at the next webinar about storytelling, and I'll tell you a few stories.